So in 2026, there's a solar eclipse that's going to trace a path across the globe. But here's the wild part. Almost nobody will see it. Its big moment happens over the empty ice of Antarctica. So why on earth are some people treating this total non-event as a forecast for huge global change? Well, let's get into it.
And that's really the big question we're digging into, isn't it? We're going to unpack a pretty specific astrological interpretation that claims this incredibly remote celestial event actually holds some powerful clues about the future of global politics, world leaders, and some major international alliances. Here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll cover the basic astronomical facts of this, well, invisible eclipse. Then, we'll dive into the symbols of transformation the source says are key. After that, we'll look at an astrological world map that links the event to specific places. We'll talk about the people and powers supposedly affected. And finally, we'll lay out a timeline for when all this change might actually happen.
All right, so first things first, let's just get grounded in the basic facts of the event itself. Understanding why it's so hidden is kind of the key to understanding the claims about its hidden influence. Okay, so here are the vitals. The event is an annular solar eclipse. That means the moon looks a little smaller than the sun, creating that cool ring of fire effect. It all goes down on February 17th, 2026, and it's part of a cycle known as the Solar Saros Series 121. Now, here's where it gets interesting, at least according to the source. This particular eclipse series is on its way out. It's basically dying. As you can see, this is number 61 in a 71 event cycle. And astrologically, that's seen as adding this whole theme of endings and finality to whatever this event means. And here is the kicker. That full ring of fire, it's only visible over a research station in Antarctica. A super faint, you'd probably miss it, dimming of the sun might be seen in the tippy southern parts of South America and Africa. For literally almost everyone else on the planet, nothing. Zip. It's a non-event, visually speaking.
So if it's not about what we can see, then what's the big deal? This is where we get into the symbolic reading of it all. The source looks way beyond the physical event to what it calls the astrological figure, which is built on all these different layers of meaning. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, to really get what the source is claiming, we first need to talk about something called Sabian symbols. Just think of them as these poetic, symbolic little phrases for every single degree of the zodiac. They're meant to give a deeper, more intuitive meaning to an event's position in the sky.
So the eclipse happens at the 29th degree of Aquarius, and its opposite point is at the 29th degree of Leo. The source really zeroes in on the symbols for these 2 points. For the eclipse itself, it's a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis. Pretty clear, right? For the opposite point, it's a mermaid emerges from the ocean waves, ready for rebirth. I mean, when you put those two together, the message isn't exactly subtle, is it? The argument is they both point overwhelmingly towards one thing: profound transformation. But the analysis goes even deeper, looking at something called midpoints, which is kind of like the balance of energy between planets. The source pulls out 3 key ones you see here. Venus/Mars, that suggests passion, but also, sudden outbursts. Mars/Node can mean cooperation, or it can mean disputes. And Sun/Uranus points to a drive for reform, but with a big risk of sudden upsets and tension. The main takeaway here is that when you read them all together, they're seen as a recipe for really high emotional tension and a kind of rebellious, change-is-coming atmosphere. Okay, so we have these big themes of transformation and tension, but how does that connect to, the real world? Well, the source uses a technique that actually projects these astrological energies right onto a map of the Earth. These projections are called culmination lines, and the idea is that these lines show where the influence of a planet or the eclipse itself is going to be the most powerful and focused on the globe. It's how the celestial event gets tied to specific geopolitical hotspots. And according to this astrological map, Western Europe is a huge focus. The main eclipse line is said to pass directly through Brussels and Paris. I mean, the symbolic hearts of the EU. At the same time, a line representing Mars, the planet of conflict, runs right through the UK and Spain. The source connects these placements directly to existing high tensions inside the European Union over politics, money, and of course, the war in Ukraine. Then there's this other critical line, the Saturn/Neptune line, which is seen as impacting this massive and, let's be honest, volatile area. It goes over Western Russia, including Moscow, all of Ukraine, and Turkey. And then it keeps going south, covering the Levant, Egypt, and the super important Suez Canal. The interpretation for this one is all about major structural change, the dissolution of the old order to clear the way for something totally new. So we've gone from broad regions, and now the analysis zooms in even further, claiming specific impacts on key people, governments, and international groups.
The source claims that Donald Trump specifically will be particularly affected, with the eclipse axis falling across some really key points in his astrological chart. And this is linked to critical challenges he might face related to Iran, Israel, and the economy. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security also gets a mention, with the source predicting some potential backlash against its actions around this time.
Big alliances like NATO and the EU are also said to be right in the spotlight. The nation of Israel is highlighted, and the source makes a point of noting that Trump, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, and the state of Israel itself all share a very similar Mars placement. This is seen as pointing towards some really intense internal pressures over war, national identity, and what the public wants. And to really illustrate the kind of public pressure it's describing, especially in Europe, the source uses some, well, let's just say very strong language. It includes this direct quote: "The elites and their fourth estate grind their teeth over the lousy peons' refusal to volunteer to die for the banking cabal's ancestral blood feud's essential freedoms." This quote is really used to frame a perceived massive gap between what political leaders want and what the public is willing to do. So we've got the places, we have the people, and we have the themes. But the final piece of this whole forecast is the timeline. When is all this transformative stuff supposed to actually happen? Well, the source gives us a pretty clear timeline. The whole period of influence kicks off with the eclipse on February 17th. But the effects are expected to show up fast, with what the source calls a Mars activation on March 1st. The whole period is then expected to wrap up in late November, when a Mars-Jupiter conjunction is said to provide a double activation, basically finalizing the changes that the eclipse set in motion. So, at the end of the day, what we have here is this incredibly detailed and provocative forecast, and it all comes from a celestial event that almost no one on Earth will even see. It paints a picture of transformation, tension, and the breakdown of old systems from Brussels to Washington. And the question that leaves us with is this: is it a hidden roadmap for the future, or just a really compelling story written in the stars?